Awesome. Well, I think I prefaced it. This was actually the only session that we're bringing back to back, so we're doing a rerun, including one panelist that I had the opportunity to work with for a number of years. He was on the panel last year, and himself has been going through an entrepreneur journey. The rest of our panel is made up of a lot of folks that have taken challenges, launching brands, whether traditional retail brands that they wanted to bring online, launching a passion project, everywhere in between, and in some cases leaving e-commerce altogether, which I think is important. But there's a lot of parables. I wouldn't do justice introducing them, so I'd love to have an opportunity. Maybe we start with you, Edmund, to sort of share your name, a little bit of your background, and then we'll dig in. I'd love to pick all your brains today.
Cool. My name's Edmund Georges. I'm a founder of Hobbiesville, co-founder of Hobbiesville. We're a collectible retailer. We sell online and in store. Past 10 years, I've been involved in a number of different projects, hospitality, retail, everything from restaurants to retail stores. That covers it.
Awesome. Edmund and I actually spent a bunch of time in F1, so I got to pick his brain. I had invested a bit in hobbies, Bear Bricks, if anyone knows what they are, which are doing just about as well as my Robinhood account, which is not all that good. Andrew.
What's going on, everyone? Sorry, I didn't get the invite to F1. That sounds amazing.
That's good.
I'm Andrew Merle. I've worked in marketing for about 20 years now, mostly in the sports and lifestyle space. I've worked for a bunch of big brands like New Balance, Red Bull, Cliff Bar, but also been the CMO of a couple different startups, and now I have my own marketing consulting agency, so focused on sort of sports, lifestyle, CPG brands.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon Fay. I lead e-commerce and marketing for a company called Minilux, based here in Boston. It's a D2C, clean, and ethical nail care brand with 21, soon to be 22 locations nationwide and headquartered in Boston. Prior to that, I was at a Shark Tank brand called House of Noah, formerly Little Nomad, specializing in baby play mats and standing mats. And then prior to that, and really where I got my start in e-commerce, was at a company called Baked by Melissa in New York City, selling these tiny little bite-sized cupcakes and playing in the same world and field as Harry and David and edible arrangements. And so I've really kind of been in a number of different industries, but always focused on the D2C e-commerce side of things. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Alfred, and I've been in e-commerce for about 8 years. I had started a supplement brand that I co-founded called Vital Fit Nutrition. It was a plant-based recovery brand focused on sports performance. That company was acquired by TB12 about 5 years ago now. I was at TB12 for close to 4 years. At the end, I was leading our e-com efforts, and I recently transitioned into luxury real estate, but excited to connect with old friends, talk about the transition, and hopefully share some stories along the way. So excited for today. Thanks for all being here.
Awesome. I highly suggest, and actually I just learned a little bit about some of you all. Number one, baby on the way in November. Gonna have to see if we have some connects from back in the day.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And Isaiah, who you guys all got to meet, we went to Crumble last night, which was almost a giant mistake. I think I'm riding the high from that today. But as we dig into the entrepreneur journey, I think what would be interesting, because just speaking to you all, for any period of time, I've learned you all had different journeys. I'd love to sort of hear a little bit about how each of you have gone through the entrepreneur's journey, and along that way, maybe one or two tidbits. You don't have to give away the secret sauce unless you want to, of things that really have worked well, and then spoiler alert, we'll go to the things that did not work well, which I'll share a little bit about myself. Why don't we start with you, Shannon? Let's switch it up.
Okay, so I got my start in this whole world. I was working for a company actually called Source One. It was an energy consulting company, and I was doing data entry, and that was fun. And I was really looking for a new opportunity, and the company actually had an internal SaaS team. and they were looking for a quality assurance analyst. Long story short, kind of like hit the ground running, taught myself how to be a software quality assurance analyst, got that job, and like really from there just kind of started to snowball. I moved from Boston to New York, and for the one and only time, Baked by Melissa happened to be looking for a software quality assurance analyst, and not a taste testing quality assurance analyst, but a software quality assurance analyst. So from there was really able to get into the e-commerce and D2C world and out of consulting. And just, took in as much information as I could and really came up through the product route of things, really thinking about e-commerce and the digital experience more from a technical side first, and then really coming in and thinking about, what does this mean? What does this mean to the customer, and how's the customer going to react to this? And really just kind of building on that thought process, learning who the customer is, really thinking about what are their pain points, what are they looking for, what are they gravitating towards, and then helping them to find that, easier. And so building on that, from House of Noah, it was really similar. So much of it throughout my whole career is just really focusing on what that customer needs, and finding the data to kind of back that up. But I think that's how I've kind of gotten where I am now, is just really focusing on who our customer is and never losing sight of that.
I'll leave it free range, whoever wants to jump
Yeah,
in.
I mean, I think I'll hop in there because I think knowing who your customer is and really serving the customer is something we learned really early in the process too. And I think one of the most visceral lessons I learned from VitalFit, from starting it. So it's funny, I was looking back on it because at TB12 I was leading our e-commerce efforts, and we were looking at CAC and LTV and all of these complicated metrics. How do we acquire customers? And I was thinking back to when my co-founder Cam and I started VitalFit, and we had made this beautiful website and we had poured hours into it and we had launched it to the world, and we thought, oh, like the sales are just going to come rolling in. Where is everybody? And we learned very quickly that that's not how customer acquisition works, and that you really have to get out in the field, connect with your customers, learn the insights, and then apply that to your business. And that's where you can really get that product market fit. And so for us, as I kind of go back at the lumps I learned and the lessons during my entrepreneurial journey, one of the things we did right after that is we were like, we need to get in the field, we need to understand our customer better, we need to get in front of people and really build that funnel. And so we actually partnered with a few local organizations. Cambridge Naturals, which is a health food store in Porter Square, was the first one that really believed in us. And we did demos there 3 or 4 days a week. And I remember being stoked. We led the store in sales for the month with 37 bottles of our product. And looking back on it, I mean, you can't build a business on 37 bottles in a month. But it was such a great lesson for us because in every one of those sales, we learned, what is our customer looking for? How do we differentiate from the marketplace? How do we speak to the unique value proposition of our product? And it taught us so many lessons that not only helped us grow VitalFit, but helped me in my career at TB12 and still help me today. And Cam and I, my co-founder, we had this great moment where we had grown through the health food channel, and we still hadn't really nailed down our distribution strategy. It was all still very new. And we ended up having an opportunity to work with, because of the experience with Cambridge Naturals, we had an opportunity to work with Equinox, the gym chain nationwide, and that was really the thing that put us on that scale or on that path to success. And it wouldn't have happened without getting out in front of people and really understanding how to acquire customers and ultimately serve people's need states. And so anyways, I think that was probably a good lesson that I learned along the way. But I'll pass it over to one of you guys to share another war story.
I mean, I guess just jumping in there, I think, what you mentioned, the role of strategic partnerships to help to grow your brand and credibility. I mean, so much of my journey has been in sports and lifestyle and finding those cosigns, right? I mean, this obviously
exactly.
through TB12, but the role of brand partners, athletes, influencers, testimonials, right, ratings, reviews, that sort of stuff, and leveraging that across your own channels, your paid channels, has paid outside dividends for me anyway. I mean, I've worked at a bunch of big brands and then small brands and doing my own thing. The one constant is everyone always complains about budget. So the big brands complain about budget because they're always comparing themselves to somebody else. The small brands, the startups think that but it really just becomes about being efficient with your dollars and what's going to give you sort of outsized returns. And so yeah, that's sort of where I focus on. But I think partnerships and those right cosigns have played a huge role in my journey.
I had a question before it leaves my mind, as it does. So, Alfred, you went sort of opposite, but I'm curious, and I'll ask you, but I want to give Edmund an opportunity here as well. But Andrew, sort of going from working for large brands, you talked about some of the things that are the same, but what was sort of different? Was there adjustment, do you think, influencers was more important? Is it equally important? Or what were was there adjustment, or you sort of took the same strategy and playbooks?
No, I mean, the challenges with the big brands were often not awareness, right? I mean, a lot of times, take New Balance, for example. Everybody was aware of New Balance. When I was there, they faced more of a brand consideration issue or a brand perception issue. So it was reshaping people's, opinions of the brand, whereas with startups, I mean, trial is so critical, right? So getting people to know who you are and to lower the barrier to purchase for that very first time becomes so important. So how do you get people in the door? And I think obviously you want to do that as cheaply and efficiently as possible, and then focusing on how you retain them. But I'd say that those are two really different things. I took awareness for granted at the big brands, and it's hard to buy.
So, Edmund, you spent years, and because we got to spend some time in Miami together, it was interesting to hear about your different ventures. But I believe Hobbiesville was your first sort of direct-to-consumer brand versus retail.
Second.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm learning a new thing today. But through your different types of ventures, I know you've owned restaurants, you've gone in clothing, a lot of the same playbook. Similar, I guess, question to Andrew.
So I've talked a lot about this past couple of years, is this concept of everyone says hindsight's 20/20, connecting the dots, looking back. But I think a lot of people need to shift focus into collecting the dots in the first place. And I think a lot of the success that happened with Hobbiesville was us having collected all these dots throughout the past, call it 10, 15 years, in the technology space, in the marketing space, hospitality, sales level, financial, and then being ready for the right opportunity. Like Hobbiesville, even 6 months later, wouldn't have been the same business. It was like right time, right place, huge pandemic, call it, collectible crypto rush. We were just ready. We were set up, we were incorporated, we had all of our accounts. And so when people started to really join that market, we were already ready, like we were good to go. So I think what I've been able to carry through most of my career is just kind of being a generalist and trying to learn about kind of all the different verticals. And touching on the piece around brand awareness, when you're starting a brand from scratch, brand credibility is so important, especially when there's a lot of new entrants into the market. And so for us, something that was super important early on was showing the people behind the scenes, because a lot of the other competing brands were really just online resellers versus we were a retailer. We actually got direct distribution from the manufacturers. And so when you're early, everyone is programmed to want, Amazon, not a plug, Amazon level fulfillment of next day delivery. And when you're a small business, you don't have the team to deliver on next day delivery all the time and have super forgiving customer service if a package gets lost. It's as a small business, you don't have endless resources. So I think building that credibility, caring for the customer, understanding what they want, and empowering them to understand and have the information they need. When am I getting my product? What is the product? Who am I actually dealing with? And not just being this faceless brand that they can't connect with. I think that's critical, really.
Makes a lot of sense. I think as we're talking about and plug for a future session around personalization and omnichannel, I suppose, but across all the touch points, really differentiating yourself. In some cases, at least getting to the level of, let's say, Amazon, where you understand and you trust. I mean, that's plug, I guess, Bio Prime is that the idea that some people like the idea, when is my item going to be delivered? It's one of the most effective things that we've done, even without, our friends at BioPrime, which is trying to estimate delivery times and throughout that process, updating them. It harpens back, and it was a kind of a tough lesson. Maybe it shifts us into tough lessons learned. Is we worked with a really well-funded furniture brand. We're talking about made-to-order $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 couches. And the issue that they faced was they had a lot of hype. They got written up in New York Times. They were in Vogue. They bought the full-page ads in GQ. Blah 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 blah. But on the fulfillment side, they didn't think about it so much. These couches, especially during supply chain times, would take 3 to 4 months, and there weren't these touch points. There weren't these opportunities for magic to interact with their customers where 4 months for a couch, kind of a pain in the butt. We all got used to it during COVID, but these are actually opportunities. Here's Jared. He's making your cushion today. Send them a picture, build that into sort of the flow and things like that. So that was a tough lesson that we lived through, and luckily we turned it into an opportunity for more touch points. I'd love to have you guys share, if you'd be willing, any of the things that you either thought were going to be awesome, or someone talked you into, or you tried out and tinkered. I think part of entrepreneurship is definitely tinkering, but didn't work. They're sort of cautionary stories. It could be an if, but, or and. But whoever wants to share, if you want to share. Otherwise, you say you're perfect. That's fine.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I could hop in on that. I think I have no problem sharing some downtimes, but I think really the point, and going back to your past question, I think the biggest challenge that I see in the businesses that I've started, worked with, is there's this moment where what you were doing in the past doesn't work anymore. And I think that's the biggest thing I've seen with the businesses I've worked with, is like everyone wants to be at scale. And like that furniture company is a perfect example. They thought about, how do we do everything at scale except for their operations? And I think the key for a business is that like you have to find that product market fit first and be lean. And that's where, if I was going back to the example with VitalFit, I mean, we had $0 acquisition costs because my co-founder and I were working for free trying to build our brand. We were in there, we were hustling. So certainly, our customer acquisition cost was very affordable, and that was a great model, but it wasn't at scale. But then as I've seen a lot of these businesses and kind of gotten behind the scenes, where they're trying to acquire customers at scale, but then your customer acquisition cost skyrockets and you don't have a sustainable business model and it doesn't match with your funding environment and things like that, you get into a pickle. So I think the hardest part that I see is everyone always wants to compare themselves to others or say, oh, this worked for this company, we should replicate that. But the hardest part is like kind of condensing everything you see out there and looking very honestly about where you're at and what works for you at the moment and doing that. But then even when that works, you get to a point where that no longer works for you and you need to transition to something else. And I think the most visceral example I have is that when we had VitalFit, I used to do all of the fulfillment myself. So I would wake up at 6:30 in the morning every day. It was like I would have my morning coffee, I would pack all of our orders, I would put stickers in, and our unboxing experience was really a very differentiated experience. And it was one of the reasons that we had great intimacy with our customers and our retention rates were really high. But at the same time, I mean, at scale, you can't have your co-founder spending 4 hours. I was going to the post office. I was packing everything myself, putting written notes in. And I still remember we were acquired by TB12. And one of the first days I went into the meeting, they were, how are your operations? And I was like, we have an office. I have a back office. I pack it all myself. And they just looked at me like I was crazy. They were like, you're not packing these orders. That's not what we brought you in for. And I think that's really a perfect testament to, in that moment, I needed to realize, like, there's a bigger goal here. I can't be at the level that this company wants to be at. I can't be doing that anymore. And I need to work on a solution that works at this scale. But then even within that moment, you're outsourcing your fulfillment. You can't go to the biggest fulfillment networks where you're going to be inconsequential to their business. You have to find a fulfillment center that your business is still meaningful enough to them and they're local enough that you get the support you need. So I think across all my experiences, it's really been, everyone wants to simplify things, and I even see it, I think social media is a big part of the problem, because you'll see, just do this. Oh, this automated fulfillment worked for me. 3PL drop shipping worked for me. Do this, do that. And ultimately, there just isn't a simple one-answer solution. It's that contextual nature and the learnings that you have that differentiate you and then put you in a position to operate differently and ultimately win. So I think that's probably, over the course of my entrepreneurial journey, the hardest constant point of adapting is especially when it's something that is currently working, knowing you have to give it up and do it a different way. So I don't know, I'm sure you guys have some stories as well, but that was a big one for me.
Amazing. Shannon, I actually had a question for you.
Sure.
How was I'm trying to put my finger on the timeline, but sort of the shift. I mean, you took on a bit of a challenge. We were part of that journey, shifting from, a retail, brick and mortar focus only to a wholly owned brand. Were there any lessons learned through that, or things you do different?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, when I joined Minilux, Minilux has a line of proprietary product, clean nail care products that were actually developed for use in our studios. That was the main focus, main function. And obviously during COVID, tough to go and get a manicure or a pedicure. And it was before my time really at the company, but the company really saw an opportunity to take the products that we were using in service and give them to, offer them to the masses. And so when I came in, the e-commerce journey was really at the beginning, and it was looking and seeing like how do we get some movement here. The nail care space is pretty crowded, right? So what are our differentiators? We are clean, we are ethical, but there are others that are clean and ethical as well. And I think one of the biggest things that we have really seen success with is in our creative testing, storytelling, and again, going back to what the customer's pain points are. And I think people get really excited about the words creative testing, and they think, okay, that means, let's test this blue background against the red background, and that will really make a difference. And maybe at scale, when you're working for, I don't know, I've never worked for a company like New Balance, but maybe when the optimization is like, you're so high up there, that matters. But at a company that's just kind of trying to find its feet in e-commerce, it's really about what are those messages that are going to connect with people? What is the creative? How do we prove that actually, yes, this product works? And so much of that comes down to the creative testing in what we're doing in paid, as well as on our product pages themselves. So I think just to answer your question, it was. It's been a really interesting journey trying to figure that out, but I can't say enough for putting time and focus behind the brand and the content and the storytelling and really listening to your customer and understanding why they would need you and then going in hard on that message.
Thank you. I guess circling back, I know, Andrew, you just referenced, New Balance. We got to work together on a startup that you were involved in. What were some of the sort of, I guess, biggest challenges that you sort of saw or you didn't anticipate, and how did you end up overcoming them?
I think some of the biggest missteps I've had, or in a leadership position, is just sort of either not communicating goals clearly or having misalignment in goals. Like, even at a small company, what are you trying to achieve, right? Is it growth? Is it profitability? Ideally it's profitable growth, but I think a lot of times you can have people sort of running around and thinking that they're doing the right thing, but what are the metrics that really matter? And I just feel like digital marketing has gotten so complicated. There's so many acronyms and so many metrics that you could measure. Simplifying things, right? Like, to me, I've always gotten through the obstacles by aligning with either the team or my manager or leadership or whatever around, okay, what is the big objective? And then for any of the things that we're doing, what is the specific KPI that we're measuring over what time horizon? And just like really kind of dumbing it down to that level, because otherwise just all the metrics get to be so confusing, I think.
Yeah. Being on the other side, sort of the SI services side, we're always hit with the KPIs, and I find myself more and more, especially post iOS 14 world, being like, but why? Like trying to figure out what actually matters. And I think that's one of the things we've been focused on is like understanding like the brass tacks, the metrics that work for even certain product lines or certain brands don't matter, and we all get sort of stuck on the vanity, metrics. I end up sort of putting my opinion out to the world, which is kind of broad, but I'm no specialist. In a recent article that was just Moo, I don't know, marketing efficiency ratio, which is what we've been super focused on. Which is the idea of like how much you're spending and how much revenue is coming through the door, and can your margins support that? What does this number have to be at the end of the day? So it's almost like we've gotten less sophisticated, but more focused on building the brand, and then equally more important, building the relationship. I think like the land grab period is kind of over. But I want to make sure I don't cut you off. If there was any cautionary stories that you wanted to share.
I mean, just continuing on that topic, I think the biggest struggle is really attribution at the end of the day. Everyone wants to sell you something. Every agency wants to sign you up and talk about like how much ROAS they're getting and like all these different metrics that are obviously very self-serving. But then you get on board and you spend all this money on a retainer, and then you look at your top line revenue and you look at your profitability, and it pretty much mostly stay the same, except now you've got this big expense to this agency that you've onboarded. And you do that 6-7 times, and then you're looking back and you're like, okay, so all the things that actually impacted the business were internal initiatives, and how do you define the attribution between what you did versus what the agency helped build and create? And it's just such a loose metric. Like it's on the SEO side, I don't mean to harp on the SEO side, but there's so many factors at play, and it's such a dynamic target that you spend all this money, and then they're like, yeah, we're doing great. We're ranking on all these keywords, and it's like, okay, but what does that actually mean to the bottom line or even the top line? And they're never able to explain it or to actually give you a clear answer. But you spend all this money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Jared. Sorry, I just wanted to jump in because I think like there's been an example that stood out to me over the last 6 or 9 months because I was in the same shoes. Like, how do we manage attribution? And I think like tying together the part about creative, I would always be doing these creative campaigns and working with agencies, and I would look at the creative and just be like, even me, I'm not inspired by this. I'm not, even I knowing the brand, like I'm not really, this isn't captivating. I'm not gonna want to really click on this. It's a little too hard. But then you would go into our click-through rate is this, and our acquisition cost is this. And the brand that I've really idolized for a long time is Airbnb. I think they're one of the smartest companies on the planet. And I look at the campaigns they started running during COVID. And there are these campaigns where it's people traveling to Japan and eating sushi, or they put Yellow Submarine and it's an amazing submarine destination on Airbnb. And you watch those commercials and it's captivating and it makes you want to get an escape, and it speaks to all of the brand promise and everything that makes Airbnb unique. And I have no idea what the attribution is like, what their customer acquisition costs, what those campaigns delivered, but I know that that's probably the most effective marketing I've seen in the last few years. And so to the point about it kind of ties it all together, right? Like simplification, telling a brand story, and cutting through the noise on creative. And I think that's just an example of something I've seen recently where I'm just like, it took me a little bit to get my head out of the sand and to really like look at a higher level and say like, this is what the best brands are doing, and this is really the direction most people should be going and moving forward.
Have you booked a trip with Airbnb recently?
I have many, yeah, and I think even as it's funny, like I see their Vrbo commercials too, and Vrbo's their promise is like, but it's totally private, but it's not shared. And I mean, I go on Airbnb all the time, and you just click a button and you have options, and so I see the Vrbo commercial, and I'm like, this isn't compelling to me. Why would I want to go to you instead of Airbnb? And because they built that brand equity. And I just think that's like such a small, easy example that ties like a lot of the things we've said so far together. And it's just really stuck out in my mind over the last few months.
Amazing. Parting thoughts, and I think sort of jumping off, it's something I'm curious because we've been pushing. I want to make sure and verify that we're not pushing garbage. Totally possible. No one trusts agencies. Yeah, Alfred and Edmund, you sort of touched on it, but one of the things that we've been believing in as of late and pushing through our customer acquisition campaigns has been what we refer to as direct response. I would call it more organic content. The lack of production, high-end production, almost seems to be doing better. I'm curious whether with the brands you represent or you've worked in the past, if you sort of seen this post iOS 14 change as sort of the behaviors on our phones. Like all of us have TikTok nowadays. Like I have an addiction to lock it away. If that's something you guys have seen, and if that really made a change for you all in building brand, but also, of course, influencing revenue.
Sorry, just to clarify the question, it was the impact of the privacy settings?
Privacy and also whether you've tinkered around with sort of doing more social focused paid media. So we call it direct response. So send us a bear brick, and I'll be like, oh my God, unboxing experience.
Like the user generated content.
Yeah, exactly. In your advertising.
It definitely is interesting. And this is not just in the retail space, it's actually in the hospitality space. Yeah. When you share content that is professionally shot, you get no engagement. But then you shoot raw cell phone content, saturated, crisp, realistic, you can taste it through the picture, or you can see the product through the image, and your engagement is significantly higher and it converts better. A lot of the content that we've repurposed from customers performs better than the campaign we spent 3 weeks planning. And they shot it with no planning, and it was just kind of an off-the-cuff kind of video. So I think that people's content strategies definitely need to shift to overcome a lot of the other stuff that's going on.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think to layer in another point there, I think I definitely agree. Especially at the end of my time at TB12, we saw organic content, influencer content, and also I think influencer everyone just, people, I would say during COVID especially, people's BS meters, consumers' BS meters got better. And they were just, I think in general, people are largely tired of being sold to. They want that authentic connection to the brand. They want real testimonials. They want people who actually use the product. And so for our creative, the creative that featured people who were genuine fans of the brand. And I can tell you, we had Tom Brady and a random influencer with 1,000 followers, their creative could outperform a video clip with Tom Brady in it because it felt more real and it had more connective tissue with people. And I made a career change recently into luxury real estate, and that's been a real learning for me too. And I think that one of the things I've learned, the principal that I work with, one of his favorite things is a lot of the properties we work with, there's one buyer. And so you can spend all your time marketing, but it doesn't matter. There's just one buyer, and they're either going to buy it or they're not. And I think if I were to kind of reflect that back to my time in e-commerce or in CPG, I think so much of the time people spend time and money trying to sell to people that will never be customers of their brand. If someone wants something, and again, this kind of relates back to real estate. If someone comes to an open house and loves the house, they put an offer in and they want to buy it. But there's also 10 people that come and they're either walking the neighborhood or they're trying to impress their new girlfriend or whatever it might be, right? And what that leads to is none of those people are buyers. And so if you conflate that back to e-commerce, if you spend all your time and money on the 10 buyers who aren't real, you're just going to end up with an unprofitable business. Whereas the key is really honing in on that one buyer who's real and having authentic and captivating content that speaks to them. And I think that's the secret sauce in e-commerce right now. But just with kind of the funding environments, the desperation in some of the e-com brands, the lack of strong leadership and the ability to weather some of the hurdles that have been out there, I think people have just kind of missed that memo in as they're looking towards these unrealistic targets. I think it really starts with just being a realist and knowing who your customer is and just being laser focused on speaking to them. But sorry, that's the end of my TED Talk for now. I'll pass it to you guys, sorry.
I think on that was really interesting. I think on the creative element, because I've toggled back and forth on this between the high production value and then the UGC and kind of organic social stuff. And I think it can work both ways. I think it can be dangerous, though, to go too far down the UGC route if you don't have a strong brand identity. Mm-hmm. I think taking the time up front to know exactly who you are and what your brand is and stands for, make sure that you're not giving a confusing sort of fragmented view of what the brand is. Once you've established that, then I totally agree where the UGC and the sort of down and dirty stuff can perform way better. But I find some of the polished stuff just helps, depending on what you want your brand to be, it just helps with that sort of aspirational image if that's what you're going for.
Absolutely. If anyone wants to send free products to Jared, I'll certainly be returning them. With that, if there is a question or two, we can make a minute or two. Marcus might be able to come around. If not, then we'll have about 3 minutes for refreshments. We got iced coffee, and then we'll head into the next one. Raise your hand if you have a question. Otherwise, we're good. Okay. Oh. Marcus, you know?
I can be loud enough.
All right, you be loud enough. There you go.
From an e-com perspective, you thought of going into retail and doing demo. It's kind of foreign to some people. Could you speak more about your experience doing that? And I don't know if anyone else has experience with that as well and how it affected the e-com side of the business.
Denny, you guys want to hop in on that one? Or?
Just to clarify, it was you said the in-person aspect of retail?
The in-person, like in-store demos.
Right. So I can speak to that. On our side, our sales split is about 90% online, 10% in store, but we can't operate without our stores. Our stores are critical because it's where community is built for us. I know a lot of people talk about building community and they go hire someone who's the community person, but it's not authentic. For us, we host tournaments, we host events. People can come check out products. People shop online and then pick up in store. I think people are really, really over waiting for packages to show up and losing packages and dealing with that whole mess. So what we've seen a big shift towards is the buy online, pick up in store, and just being able to interact with others in that community if you do have a community in your industry. And being able to kind of touch and feel products. Like, I don't think that's going away anytime soon. You can try to replicate online, and obviously it's a lot more scalable online, but there's something to be said about having strategic flagships in the right cities.
Yeah, and I think that's something I've seen as well. Is I think especially during COVID, everyone really rushed towards this idea of you could be a D2C only brand, and that was sustainable. But the more I look around, I was reading this research piece recently, and I think it was like the 5 hottest e-commerce IPOs of D2C IPOs of the last few years. Their stock price has been tanking, and I think that's partly a reflection of the macro environment. People are looking for more in-person experiences, but I also think it speaks to the fact that an omni-channel brand is you're more protected, you're more diversified, and it enables you to lower your customer acquisition cost in each channel and really optimize your business. So at least for me as a bootstrapped entrepreneur, I viewed, and this was something my co-founder and I argued with like constantly for what it's worth, because when we started, he would say that this would take too much of our attention away from running the site or scaling, and my counterpoint was, this gets us in front of people, we can acquire people cheaply, and I think in hindsight, even he would agree, and we're best of friends, so it wasn't a battle that lasted long, but I think like having an omni-channel approach and really being flexible, meeting your customers where you are, and to your point, building that in-person community, I think that's one of the biggest kind of competitive moats or trenches you can build around your business nowadays. So I would say, and then in terms of the demo environment itself, it can kick you down. It takes your ego down a notch for sure, because I still remember we would have people walk past us and not give us the time of day. Oh, do you want a sample? No. And you get kind of all of this negative feedback, and in a way it's kind of this little analogy for what entrepreneurship actually is. It's getting kicked down, and you just have to keep getting back up and fight another day, and eventually the tide turns and the people are buying your product without you ever being there, and it just sells itself off the shelf. So I think, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs these days, and I tell almost every single one of them, even if you view it as a D2C brand and a company, getting out there in the field and meeting your customers, and also speaking to retailers as well, because we got great feedback from people who we wanted to work with about, oh, your product really should have this on this, or oh, it doesn't stand out enough in this sense. So I'm a big believer that any point of feedback is a good point of feedback, and getting out in front of the audience, as scary as it might be or as tough as it might be, really leads you to long-term success.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. They'll be around the rest of the day. We're going to have a little snack break.